Please continue.
Valha Valamudan, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to make this presentation. I make it as still an aspirant who was in here just over a year ago and has been practicing in whatever little progression I have seen. My main intent is to first share that, and from my own enthusiasm in neuroscience, my experiences, putting it into the context of Maharishi's practices and how profound those aspirations and practices suddenly become in terms of managing anger. When I was asked to look at what it is that possibly I can present, this is something that I have seen tremendous benefits with, and hence I'm really honored to be presenting this and looking at things more closely by ways of preparing for this presentation. Kartikeyanaya, thank you so much as always. Just wonderful presentation to lay the basis for neutralization of anger, and it covers everything. I can just stop at this point and say apply management of anger in the same way as analysis of thoughts, but we'll deal with a few specifics, and I have borrowed from the Manavalakai Sky Yoga for Human Excellence and our own sessions that we had last year, my small experiences, and just package this. So in terms of the lay of land, how we will be approaching neutralization of anger, we will discuss what is anger and why it is a secondary emotion or unnatural, as some of us feel it is whenever we get angry. The second is we will deal with the reasons and how it perpetuates. And because of all this, what ill effects do we have to incur internally as well as those around us who are at the receiving end? After that, we will discuss managing anger and then neutralization of anger. I wanted to separate these two ideas because regardless of how much we try, anger does sort of have its upsurge. I got angry in the process of thinking through the presentation as well. Minor, but it's unavoidable. So how do you manage it on a day-to-day basis? And there are some amazing tools that Maharishi has given, most predominantly introspection, tolerance and forgiveness. And then there is a point about spiritual bypassing that I wanted to bring forth because that became a big question in my quest for neutralizing anger. And then we will go ahead with neutralizing anger, which is more of a long-term, deeper practice so that we don't have to manage anger as often. So this is the lay of land. Please feel free to stop me at any point or raise your hand, and I will try and address any questions in the process. So let's start with what is anger. Like I said, anger is a secondary emotion. And a very good metaphor for that would be how the color yellow is not a primary color, it's a secondary color. We mix green and blue to bring it, right? In the same manner, anger comes secondary to 2 or 3 major emotions: desire, fear, and sadness. So that's why we often feel that it's not natural to us. Now, typically our primary emotions like fear or sadness can be found underneath the anger. So fear includes minor anxiety to extreme worry, and sadness includes loss, disappointment, discouragement, all these aspects. So then why do we manifest it as anger versus showing it as fear or sadness, as many people do, right? What happens is socially we are tuned in to the idea that fear and sadness are negative emotions, and we sort of have a feeling of disempowerment and we don't feel like expressing it. We don't feel so much in control of the situation. So, what we do is subconsciously shift these ideas into anger. Because when we are angry, we feel more in charge. There is this surge of energy, and you're feeling like you can do what you want to do at that point, rather than feeling vulnerable or helpless. So, essentially, anger can be a means of creating a sense of control and power when we are feeling vulnerable and uncertain. And Maharishi has included fear in his this quote that we see here. Anger and fear are the inner flames that ruin human lives. They can be eliminated only through the realization of Shiva and Jiva. The second part we will see as we go down the presentation. So the reasons of anger are covered very beautifully by Maharishi's definition of anger. Its thwarted desires lead to a burning need to do away with the obstruction. So we have a certain desire to procure a certain object, say, and somebody asks us or tells us that no, this is not possible, or something comes in the way, and that really upsets us, and there's this huge generation of force within us to remove that obstruction, and this emotional force is known as anger. There are these, as we discussed, fear and sadness definitely primarily manifest as anger, but as Karthikeyan talked about imprints, that's a less discussed factor in popular science. Within fear itself, I think the child of the past is a major identified thing in modern psychology, as well as something that suppressed feelings of a child manifest as fear later. Say an unhealthy relationship between parents leads to a fear of abandonment from the partner, and then that leads to so many fights, insecurity, jealousy that manifest between the two partners, and then there's so much anger, right? Then there are other constant stressors, like, say, the fear of losing one's job, and it could be irrational, but perennially imagining that, oh, I might lose my job, and then coming back home and sort of venting it on the family or even at the workplace at your subordinates. And then trauma is one big reason. It's also known as post-traumatic stress disorder. Say somebody has had to go through like a natural disaster, like an earthquake, and they hear those sounds at a later point, many years later, and it still impacts them, and then they react to it, possibly by ways of anger as well. The next point, sadness, just turning that aspect and looking at it as well. I would really like to distinguish it from depression, because depression is a very real, hard clinical condition. And if you talk to a depressed person about meditation or yoga, all we will do is upset them. It's not a real tool to them at the point at which they are at that time. So, just like a cautionary, because I know depressed people and I have seen them go on medication and see the positive benefits come off at a later point. So, let's always distinguish that. Within sadness, sadness is mostly like happenstances of life. Something occurs in life, something that's inevitable, a loss, and other people who don't believe in your dream, then having that sense of worthlessness, or suppression. And again, suppression may be from a person who is so-called normal. You are not on the receiving end of, say, a pathological narcissist or a sociopath, that form of suppression. Otherwise, again, it assumes a clinical form, which is best dealt with by experts. So that leads to sadness. And then Karthikeyan and I talked about imprints. So all those experiences we have, whether in this birth or our previous ones, gives us certain personality traits that lead to impatience. Impatience typically leads to anger, intolerance, believing that a certain set of people are superior to the others, or addictions. Just, think of telling an alcoholic that it's not good for them, right? They know that very well, but they're so addicted to it that they'll get very angry at you for presenting that simple fact to them. So these are the reasons. And as these reasons emerge, this anger gets perpetuated. It just has a very strong energy to perfuse within us and then without us. And I really like the way Maharishi has explained how anger sort of tornadoes inside the body. Now, our typical awake state brainwave is around 14 cycles per second, but when we are angry, it increases to 25 to 30 cycles per second. We can literally feel that pulsation in our head, right, when we are angry. Now, when this happens, the life energy particles start to spin very fast and they get thrown out of the body due to that motion, increased motion. And as these frequencies of the brainwave increase, more and more life energy particles are expelled of the body. And now that we have lesser life energy, we feel very depleted and drained. And then at the end of anger, there's so much tiredness and disappointment. So that's what we have to go through. And around us, typically, if just look at the list, like your life partner, your children, your workplace, these are like our most favorite things in life, what give us so much joy and life force. And those are the very people who we drain out when we get angry. And then obviously there are relatives and friends. And in terms of society, I would really like to point out at two things. That is politics, and by ways of politics, media, and religion. Are these two facets use anger in a very powerful way to rile us up. So this is not us being angry. This is using anger as a tool to manipulate societies, which we should be very cautious of. Now, the ill effects of anger, obviously, like when so much is going on in your brain, personally, internally, um, it impacts us as, again, what Karthikeya said, the physical as well as the astral level. And in these two ways, first, it's neuroscience has shown by neuroimaging how the brain literally flips from our frontal cortex into our reptilian brain. And this brain is known to either perform on intuition and also not be mindful of taking the time to think through things. So when our fight or flight response happens, we literally switch on our reptilian brain. And the same phenomena happens when we get angry. They call it flipping a lid, or in Hindi, they say, "Mera dimag ghum gaya," right? Or in Mumbai, my hometown, they say, "Mera bheja sarak gaya." I know, I'm sure in Tamil we have some choice phrases about how anger literally flips the brain. And this is physically what's happening is you are thinking through your reptilian brain, you don't give it any quality thought, and then you say things that you repent later. And you say, "Oh, it wasn't me," right? So it really wasn't you. It was your brain being taken hostage by your reptilian brain. So individuals and anger become one. The mind assumes the shape and quality of objects it thinks about. We've literally seen, Guruji writes about how the face becomes animal-like. And we literally see that happening, right? The quality of the object is not human. It's not divine. So it changes us. Mind becomes incapable of maintaining awareness or analyzing when anger overcomes it. Again, going back to the reptilian brain. and anger disappears in the face of awareness. So when when one has expelled their life energy, we are forced to come back. That's body's own circuitry to a so-called calm state of mind, and then we become aware of the consequences of our action. Now, once anger finds a place in the mind, it arises again and again, and one loses temper, even in the absence of a valid reason. So, again, imprints, getting habituated to it, not facing the consequences of one's anger because perhaps somebody has a more privileged background. So many times, servants, we get angry at servants so much because we know that there are no consequences, right? And then definitely within the self, diseases taking root. Again, with the fight or flight mechanism, what happens is that the body starts to conserve energy for your peripheral body organs to run or to fight, and hence other involuntary organs like your digestion or your spleen or liver, they take a back seat in that time. So indigestion or liver issues, all these things start cropping up in the internal organ, hormonal imbalances. And the other aspect is because of staying in a constant state of minor or aggravated fight or flight, um, it leads to a constant increase in blood pressure. So we have hypertension and other blood related issues. Mm, Again, in case of others, one to one hurting your loved one, and these may sound like cliches, but just giving this a second thought in context of anger is very important, I feel, because um, it's the second thought where really our heart changes. I mean, yes, we know anger hurts our loved ones, but if for a moment you think about your partner and how sometimes so meaninglessly we hurt them, it's a very damaging feeling. Also, the imprints or sanskar that we are creating for children, they live in a state of fear for that period. We feel they are resilient, but really, children, instead of fight or flight, they really freeze, and again, they store it as imprints within their psyche. Career growth is impacted, and here I'd like to bring out many a times I feel, especially here in the US where hire and fire is such a common policy, we when we are at the receiving end of, say, a superior's firing, uh, we actually forget that it's not about us. It's really a business need. And keeping things in perspective, especially at workplace, is very important instead of turning on your reptilian mind and letting the consequences impact you. And then, of course, with friendships, it's invaluable. It takes time to develop them. And then suddenly you may get angry and feel bad about it. But many a times the other person may not have the resilience to come back to you. Same ways in case of relationships. So we see how powerful yet tragic anger is. And Rishi Kural has said it very well, that if you would protect yourself, guard against your own anger, for anger not controlled would lead to self destruction. And this is such a powerful thought, even if, again, if you read it like 2, 3 times, so many life episodes start emerging in the mind. So we will, like I said, first look at, okay, so anger is inevitable. We live in a human form, but how do you reduce the impact and the frequency of anger is something we'll talk about now. And being right here in this room and having done introspection has been perhaps like the most profound change in me managing my anger. I would read complicated texts by Carl Jung and people about shadow work, but this is so simple. This is so intuitive. This is so natural. We don't need to make anything complex. Just do your self introspection on a regular basis. So, I wanted to put introspection in context of the window of tolerance. And this window of tolerance was built by Dan Siegel. He's a very popular MD in the field of psychology. And he coined this term to refer to the zone of optimal arousal. This is the window of tolerance where you have the optimal arousal in the center between hyperarousal and dysregulation. Hyperarousal is typically when your energy is high, but you are in a phase of dysregulation. And it's your flight and fight response coming in. You get an emotional overwhelm. You're very impulsive. There is tension, anxiety, panic. You get an emotional outburst. This is also the area where one does overeating or restricted eating or becomes obsessive. And in extreme cases, this leads to just rage. In minor cases, we are, say, still here, and just irritated, generally irritated with people. And then hypoarousal is when we shut down or become immobilized. So we are in a reduced state of awareness. There's emotional numbness. We don't want to think too much. Slowly, there is brain fogginess. Sleep becomes variable. We're very spacey in the head in the rest of the day because of that. And when we get too depleted, a lot of times people faint as well. They just don't have the energy to carry on with life. Um, the window of tolerance in the center is where you can optimally do your day-to-day functions and move on with life without getting triggered as much, and have healthy responses. Go out, meet with friends, or at workplace, be goal driven and achieve those goals. And where I wanted to bring in Maharishi's thinking within the window of tolerance is how, if you're too hyper aroused or hypo aroused, because you lose your energy, and he talks about how, then we are people die as well. So if you go too much between these two states, you can imagine a sort of a zigzag line going up and down, and life becomes a prison. You become a victim to your own mind. And the genetic center meditation, the Shanti meditation that we do on Fridays, that becomes such a powerful way to sort of come back to your original self and see how meaningless these vagaries of the mind are. And then I really feel even these top two lines can be out. It's like that Navgraha meditation we do, where our space expands so much that hyperarousal or hypoarousal are not a thing for us. We just go on. It's like if your body is healthy, it doesn't matter if it's very cold or very hot. You're out there and enjoying yourself, especially children do it in such a beautiful way. And in the same way, if your subconscious and conscious mind are aligned well, these states don't matter anymore. So going on to like a very practical way, this is just a phenomenal way. Even if you don't have means to or time at this point to meditate, just go through this list and put in the name of the person. What is your relationship? Reason behind the anger, and what part do you play in it? This is very important because often, even for people who are spiritual, we sort of say that, oh, it's about them. They're not so evolved in their spiritual journey. But no, it's never about them. It's really, really squarely about the trigger and why that trigger sort of impacts your perspective in a way that you get angry with it. So, even if you don't get instant answers, please do think about this in terms of imprint and you know, your own nature, um, and your past experiences, and then uh, close it. If you gain closure, close it, or think through the whole process again. And Maharishi talks about doing this exercise um, with with anyone and everyone that you may potentially get angry or traditionally get angry with, and keep doing it until that list is done. And perhaps that self reflection before bedtime is a great way to do this. We can also touch upon tolerance and forgiveness. When we are in a state of hyper arousal, it's very important to forgive at that point. So if we can take that, attach that with the trigger at the time, as much as it's difficult, it'll help us reduce or curb our anger. And when we are in hyper arousal, just being tolerant and over a longer period of time being able to emerge out of the situation is also a good practice. So tolerance and forgiveness are just as powerful as introspection. this is this is a slide that in my journey of controlling anger, I'm like a very idealist person. So it becomes important for me to like, oh, so I don't have this resource, right? Like we talked about it, it gives us a sense of power. So if you, I mean, go out near the Capitol building in your city, you'll always see these bunch of protesters so angry about one thing or the other. I have worked closely with some very popular fourth generation feminists in this country, and um, they express their anger to drive change. But do they? That was my question. Like, if we don't have that recourse to anger, how do we manage our situation? And for example, in this meme, you know, if say a child is coming to you with some issue, and at school, and we give them like half baked answers, oh, be nice, always be nice, it doesn't help the child in any way. So understanding where your anger is emerging from is very important. If it emerges from your sense of ethics, it is just as important to deal with, versus if it's coming from a space of ego that it's hurt you. For example, Gandhiji, when he was thrown out of the train, he was angry, but he converted it into such a mass movement for the entire country and brought us together. Yes, there were people who used anger as a force. Also, there were freedom fighters who brought our freedom through that means. But really, if it wasn't for Gandhiji's stability, um, I don't know if so many of us would have come together in such a meaningful way. And in the same way, Rosa Parks in this country started off the civil rights movement. And if she would have gotten angry or violent, it would have only reduced her case. So it's very important to make that distinction. And again, in Guruji's book, for human excellence, in the question answer after neutralization of anger description, he talks about like have unlimited compassion for everyone. And even if that doesn't work, make it a make believe thing, which means like superficially be angry. A classic image that comes to mind is Maya Yashoda scolding Lord Krishna, or a little child, how we rebuke them. Just in your head, don't let those brain waves go to that high point or your life energy start spinning out of control. Just, and he also mentions when you are in a disempowered situation and you're angry about it, analyze your knowledge, strength, circumstances, and skill, and accordingly grow within, versus again reflecting it outside as anger. And own your journey, which is if you do think that going out there and mass protesting is important, first do put your house in order, do your thought analysis, do your introspection, And then if it still is your calling, I think one should totally go ahead and do it, because at this point you will be at a very stable phase of mind and be able to contribute in a more meaningful way. Okay, this is my favorite part because I have learned so much over this year in terms of neutralization of anger, and these are like the whole space of tools that we have from Maharishi. Blessings, self-reflection we just talked about, meditation, gazing, exercises, body exercises are just as important as mental exercises to overcome depression and sadness and anger as well. And satsang. Obviously, like the most profound thing in neutralization of anger is blessings. Most profound, or rather most powerful, and really a huge shortcut to neutralization of anger. So who do we bless? The same stakeholders, sort of, who we discussed earlier, our partner, our children, and during our meditations, we also bless our siblings. Guruji talks about how they have the same blood, the same inspirations that drive us, obviously, will sort of influence their lives as well. So bless them. And then your co-workers, your subordinates, your managers. And then my favorite part during blessing earlier would be like, bless the enemies. I'm like, yes, I'm going to bless them. And over a period of time, I actually started defining those enemies as miscreants. So we'll be asked to like bless your enemies and miscreants, and they really didn't have that power of being called an enemy upon me anymore. And at this point, I actually have to think hard about, like, okay, who is in that category? And then it's not even miscreants, it's like, who are those little irritants, who come. And I hope that sort of I reach a phase where I uh, have a healthy perspective enough to absolve that category altogether. So that's who we bless. And how we bless. Guruji is definitely very particular about the idea that it, it should be wholehearted, and during your meditation in the Turiya state. And he, in fact, mentions at one point that don't mention it casually. Like, I mean, that anecdote he mentions effectively goes on to say that it's not a good morning. It's like, it's not a hi, how are you? It's much more. It's from a great depth, and as much as a good morning is still valuable, blessing is still valuable, but if you do it from a deeper space, it is much more healing. Uh, I did want to, in terms of meditation, connect this to some neuroscience. So, because validating the mind always is exciting, right? As much as experientially it's it's encouraged that we experience things, but sometimes just letting the mind know, hey, this works, quiet down. So two areas that I wanted to focus on in meditation that get impacted. We obviously know about the pineal gland and pituitary gland, but also the limbic area that has the amygdala and the hippocampus. And I love how Daniel Goleman of the great bestseller on emotional intelligence describes this. Uh, so while the hippocampus remembers the dry facts, the amygdala remembers the emotional flavor that goes with those facts. If we try to pass a car, and this is his example, to distinguish between them, he's such a poet in that way. If we try to pass a car on a 2-lane highway and narrowly miss having a head-on collision, the hippocampus retains the specifics of the incident, like what stretch of the road we were on, who was with us, what the other car looked like. But the amygdala, that ever after will send, but it is the amygdala that ever after will send a surge of anxiety through us whenever we try to pass a car in a similar circumstance. So the hippocampus is the learning, growing area of our brain, and it helps it stores memory as well. So the larger it is, the stronger the hippocampus is. And the amygdala is this, imagine like a totally emotional person who gets like very happy and very sad and all of that and remembers and tears up. That's your amygdala. The amygdala is really big in kids, and that's why they are so alive with everything, and everything impacts themselves so much. But as you grow up, it shrinks. So one reason why kids are more fearful of the unknown is also because of the amygdala. It has both the sides. So it shrinks. Now, a lot of neuroimaging has shown that with meditation, your hippocampus actually increases in size, which means your ability to learn and create those building blocks is much higher, and your memory is far better. And in the same researchers, they compared that the amygdala actually shrinks. So you have better emotional regulation. You don't let those negative events impact you so much at a mental level. And research has shown that with depressed patients, they actually have more memory of the negative events in their life versus positive, happy people who don't remember, the minute details. They like to keep going on. It doesn't impact them. So that's the difference, and that's the power of meditation. And like the whole family of meditation that you see within Vedatrium actually addresses so many aspects of our existence and mind and emotions in so many ways. So definitely like a huge thing to neutralize anger. I also wanted to add mirror gazing, land gazing, and physical exercises we talked about, but in a little bit of sort of background research in lamb gazing, because I've been doing that for a very short time, but I I just feel it's so helpful in me uh, for me to do better meditation. So lamb gazing or either of the gazing is known as a cleansing exercise in yoga, but it has started taking the form of meditation. I think people have less time now, so even that works. So lamb gazing actually activates the pineal gland. Pineal gland, is you'll know, is like the master gland, sits right in the thuria area on the top of the head. And it's a single gland, unlike other organs or regions of the brain that are on both sides of your brain. It just sits right there as a singular gland on the top of your head. And unlike other glands that actually have either a neural circuit or nerves and vessels going via them, pineal gland doesn't have any of that. It just has secretory cells, which is literally drops. And these drops are of melatonin. And these are, I think, in some ways what we would call amrit and awakening. And if somebody is in a constant state of beautiful, relaxed awareness, I would guess it is the melatonin. And scientifically, melatonin has been proven to obviously regulate your daily circadian cycles, but also has a huge role in regulating the blood pressure. And decreased melatonin is seen in patients with Alzheimer's and Parkinson and diabetes. So it has a huge role to play in keeping your body healthy in many, many ways. And lamp gazing early morning in the twilight, looking at a very dim light, has been proven to increase the secretion of melatonin. Melatonin increases at night time, and it reduces in the thick of the night, say after 12 a.m., and it reduces as we head towards the day. That's why people who don't sleep on time get very flustered, because then the melatonin can't do its activity in the daytime. So early in the daytime, whenever you can do it in the Brahma Muhurat, it helps secrete those that excess of melatonin. And think about these Buddhist saints who would live in caves for long periods of time so that they could stay in the darkness and have access to bigger concentrations of melatonin. So lamp gazing, and if you're calm and peaceful like that, obviously anger is not even a thing you will consider throughout the day. And mirror gazing, as I have seen, just the ability to look at yourself with compassion and forgiveness. We talk about self-care in so many ways, right? Go to the spa or have a good time with your friends and stuff like that. But I think mirror gazing is a very authentic form of self-care and self-love. And I'm like, again, at not even the iceberg level of mirror gazing, but I have seen that. And that if you love yourself, when you go out of the room, you will love everything around you and everyone around you. So it becomes, again, very hard to get angry. And that's how it helps me neutralize anger. Satsang, if you remember, in the window of tolerance, the optimal arousal also helps us go out and talk to more people versus in this hypoarousal when you don't feel like meeting anyone. And creating those avenues by way of satsang is so important. Having those discussions, having those meditative walks with your friends, talking about things that being able to truthfully talk about your experience, meeting people. Singing moves certain energies in your body, and mantras as well. So all these practices also help us neutralize anger. As within satsang, I think we can have our Q&A, and I will request our senior masters to chime in as needed. Thank you so much. Valha madam.
Amazing session, Amma. I'm feeling a fresh air. I mean, it is like, I mean, with so in short time, this is a wonderful session. You have brought in so many concepts, and really good. Before we talk about further about the quality of the session, I'll ask if there are any questions from anyone.
Thank you very much, Aya.
Thank you. Any specific questions? A lot of wonderful points. So any specific questions, thoughts?
Very nice presentation, very nice understanding. Thank you so much for like enlightening us with a lot of thought process you put into. And Maharishi says, don't follow my words, think and apply. He says that in one of his poems, Sollal Mattum Nambade, Suyamai Sindhite Thiruvai. Like, just listen my words, process it, internalize it, and then express it, or like apply it in your life. That's what his biggest ask, or like blessings he gives to us. And I felt the same in your presentation. We are all very blessed to attend this session. Thank you so much.
Malhavalan Kartikeyanaya. And please know that I haven't forgotten the grace I have received from our masters. You, Prabhuaya, Ahitama is not here. And everyone whose name I can't mention, because just even listening to them singing in our morning meditation, I am so grateful. So this is the least of my duty. I had a very small but important topic to talk about. And my only prayer to Maharishi was that, like, I hope I'm able to deliver something of some use. So thank
was
you
very
so
nice.
much.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it is very nice, and we are all just tools. We are all just try to resonate with the greater concepts of Maharishi, and we were trying to pronounce, feel, and then express. And that creates its own chemical reaction within us, and around the whole world. That's what we are trying to do daily, and that definitely elevate ourselves. We all have to bless our Guru, and Guru is the key. We are all just tools, and we are all getting the opportunity to witness it through these sessions, and we are all grateful to our Guru Amma. Be blessed by the divine. Thank you.
Be blessed by the divine. Yeah, thank you.
We will share the recording to the larger group, definitely specifically mentioning about the ask them to listen. So yeah, nice Amma. Lalita Amma or Arloya, any other anything specific that you want to, your questions or any comments? Okay, that is fine. It was nice, Amma. I'm feeling very happy. The reason is I was also a little part of your. I mean, like your progress has been really good. I mean, like, I mean, like divine plus you progress in your spiritual growth, as well as you can continue doing this kind of sessions. I think you have I mean, you have the natural skills of like presentation and analyzing stuff, and and you have understood the concepts very clearly. I think you have, that is really good. Feeling really happy. So already feeling happy for the day. So entire day is going to be good.
You have no idea how much this means to me, Prabhu. I just let this thing consume me. If I can just say something small, just to give context, I have had the great fortune of studying at Harvard and MIT and thinking through the humanities kind of courses. And these sessions, and I miss that environment, obviously, having come to Austin, but these sessions are even beyond those thought-provoking classrooms that we would sit in, and these
Yeah.
are so important. And this is uh, it is ultimate honor for me to be able to continue thinking through it. Obviously, it's so beneficial for me to create that body of presentation together, because in bringing that I give it so much thought. So I will definitely take it as a positive challenge
Yeah.
and serve in any way I can. Definitely. Thank you.
Yes. Super. Yeah, because the reason is now you have the one more spectrum, right? So definitely in the study, your skills, presentation skills, or your other understanding of different aspects of life, along with the Vedatriyam, then it gives a different flavor
Correct.
which exceed things. Yeah. We can definitely feel that. Amma. So let's please continue, and we will share this one to the larger group, and really good, Amma. So I think take I mean like take some. You may look at like some other. I think this one itself, right? Whenever comes, we might want to present it to. We'll see if there is a time where you can talk about this, or you also think about maybe one more nice topic, right? In future, in next 1 or 2 months, and like 2 or 3 topics where you kind of master it, and I think so that others can also learn from it, and we can spread across everywhere. Yeah.
Definitely, I'll be very happy to do that. There is no way I can say no to any of my masters. So I'll be there.
Okay. Varga uh,
Bhargavalam.
by the grace of the divine power, Gulshanama and her family may enjoy good health, long life, enough wealth, prosperity, wisdom, and peace. I think it is. Let me stop the recording.